when you open up Autodesk, you should see something that looks like this. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is set this up so that every time you open it up, it'll create the units for you. This is in Chapter 2, so you want to do this right off the bat. You'll come down here to the command line, and you'll type in startup, just like that. Okay, most everything you do can be typed in down here. A lot of it will be done on the screen, and you'll see that as we go through. Now, what value do you want to enter for startup? We want to enter 1. I think the default is 0 or 3 or something, but we definitely want 1, and I'll show you what that does in just a second. So go ahead and hit enter for that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and close this window. Okay, and now I will open a new one, which I do right up here. Start a new, and what it'll do is it'll open up this window, and we'll get into some of these other things as we move through. Okay, but generally we're just going to go start from scratch, and then you want to choose your units. You can either choose inches or millimeters. We're going to go with imperial, which is fine, but it depends on the problem that you're actually typing out there. Okay, so now that we're in the right units, if you want to, you can update those units. Okay, in order to do that, the first thing you need to do, and something you want to do early on, is go ahead and bring up your menu bar. So you click this little arrow up here and you select your menu bar. Okay, from that you can then go into format. It gives you this drop down menu here. You can go down to units, and then from this you can change any number of different things. I'll let you play around with that, but for example, you can change the number of decimal points, that sort of thing on your units. Okay, but notice that we're in inches. Okay, and the best way to set that up again is using that startup command. Okay, a couple other things we want to bring up, just like we did with the menu bar. The first thing is I'm going to bring up the coordinates. Okay, because basically what we have here, I just go down to the lower right there and bring up coordinates. Now you can see down here you have the drawing coordinates. Okay, because basically what we have here is just a big piece of graph paper, okay, with X and Y coordinates acting on them, and you can see what coordinates you're on based down there. Another thing we want to bring up is the dynamic input. Okay, so we'll come back down to the lower left here and we select dynamic input, and you'll see that it brings up this little guy here that we can turn on and toggle on and off with it. And I'll show you what that is. Basically what that does is, rather than that command prompt down at the bottom, it'll bring it right to the front of the screen, okay, where you're typing it. Now, back to the graph paper, you can turn a grid on and off if you want. I'll bring it on so you can see it. But again, what we have here is basically like a coordinate system, like an X, Y, a horizontal coordinate system that we have here, okay? So what you can do is you can go ahead and start drawing a line. Okay, so we'll go up here to the upper left, okay, click on line, okay, and now you see specify first point, okay. So I could specify whatever point I want. You can see it here. Now why it's listed right there in the right by my cursor is because of that dynamic input. If I turn the dynamic input off, that goes away. So that can be very helpful to put it up there, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. So for example, if I want to set it at 0, 0, okay, I can type 0, the comma button, and 0, and hit enter, okay? And what it did is it put a line there. So now we've got a zoom, okay, because you can't really see where it is. So I can do that using the scroll wheel on my mouse, okay, or I can do that over here, okay, and it'll zoom, and you can play around with different things. I could zoom all, okay. It may not let me do that because I'm going through. The easiest thing is that the scroll wheel on the mouse. Okay, now it says specify the next point. So now here's where we have to talk a little bit about our axes. So if I want to draw, let's say, a straight line to the right, okay, I started at 0, 0. Let's say I want to draw a 4-inch line to the right. So I would type in 4, 0, meaning I move over 4 and up 0. So I say 4 and then comma 0 and hit enter. And you can see that it created a straight line down at the bottom that is straight over. Now, when you're finished, you can right click, hit enter. You can always hit the escape key and things like that. But you see I created a 4-inch line right here. And as I roll over to the end point, you can see I'm on my coordinates. I'm at 4, 0. Now, there's a thing called absolute and relative coordinates. Okay, and what that means is the absolute is the coordinates based on the entire thing. I'm sorry, relative is based on the last place that I clicked. Okay, now if I right click here on my dynamic input, okay, and the book doesn't really talk about this, and I can go into dynamic input settings, okay. And I can go under, there it is, okay. And if I go under the pointer input under settings, you can see that the default for dynamic input is relative coordinates, okay. Or you can do absolute coordinates. So let's talk a little bit about absolute coordinates. Okay, so I'll go ahead and select that as my default, okay, in dynamic input, okay. So now that I've set that, if I want to create a new line, again, it says, okay, specify the first point. If I go right here, let's say I want to go up straight up 2, okay. Well, remember, now I've got absolute coordinates in there. So I'm actually from the origin over 4, comma, 2, like so, and I can hit enter, and it puts the end of that line 4 over and 2 up from the horizontal. Okay, now let's talk about relative coordinates. If I hit the @ symbol, okay, I could go 1 over and 1 up from the previous point that I clicked. So if I hit 1, comma 1 with the @ in front of it, and I hit enter, you can see that it moved up 1 over and 1 up from the previous point. Now, I promise you, that's probably what you're going to be using most often. Okay, so I would go back to the default in the dynamic input settings, okay, right here, and I would go and I would switch this back to relative coordinates. Okay, so now that I have that, I can draw another line. I can pick up where I left off. Let me say I want to go over 3. Okay, now the default is that relative coordinates. So I just say 3, comma 0. And what that's going to do is from the point I just clicked and hit enter. Okay, if I wanted to go to say, let me say I want to go, well, let me just type in 3, comma 0 again. Okay, but this time I'm going to put the pound sign, hashtag, whatever you want to call it. I put the hashtag in there, and I say 3, comma 0. Now it's going to force it back to those absolute coordinates. This is going to take it to 3, 0. Okay, on my coordinates, right? And you can see down in my coordinates, this is about 3, comma 0. Okay, so again, the dynamic input uses those relative coordinates. Basically, where do I want to go from the last place that I clicked? Okay, if I want to force the absolute, I can put in the hashtag. I can change things around. If I'm not in dynamic input, the opposite is true. This might seem confusing, but it won't take long for you to figure all this stuff out. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is polar coordinates. Okay. Now, again, I've still got the dynamic input. I started a line. Okay. Polar coordinates, okay, will still be relative because that's what the default is with my dynamic input. Okay. But what you do instead is you say, how long of a line do I want? So let's say I want a 3-inch line. Okay. And I want an angle 30 degrees from the horizontal. So I do the less than sign, and then I can type in 30 degrees. So what it did here was it created a line that was 30 degrees up, okay, and 3 inches long. Okay, I can do a 4-inch line. If I want to go down, I go 4 less than, I could do negative 45. Now it'll go down like that. Let's say I want to go all the way back in the opposite direction, right? Okay. I want to go like kind of, let's say, down and to the left there. Well, remember, you're always going from the horizontal axis. So I could draw a 2-inch line at an angle of, let's say, 200, well, just say 200 degrees. That is 180 all the way back and then 20 more, which would be a line down like that. Okay, so that's how the coordinates work, okay? And again, generally, if you use a dynamic input, you're going to have these relative coordinates, which basically draw the line based on the last place you click. But you can always override that and go to absolute coordinates for the entire system, those global coordinates, back to the object or the origin that you've got there. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of this. Escape's a good thing to remember to use. Okay. Again, remember you can do all sorts of zooming. Okay, I'll let you play around with that. Okay. Honestly, more times than not, I'm hitting the escape key. You're going to use the window or the wheel. You can pan by clicking on the wheel and moving it this way. Otherwise, you can come over here, grab and click and move around. Okay, always hit escape to get back to where you are. Okay, so that's how you can kind of move around if you need to. Now, another thing you can do is you can set up snaps. And what snaps do, okay, I can turn that on. It's tough to see without my line. So let me go ahead and do the line. And you can see that I'm snapping every ½ inch. Okay, and it snaps to them. I'm not a big fan of snap, but you can use it if you want. You can also set it up by clicking here and going into snap settings. Okay, and you can change on the snap, you could change it to every 1 inch if you want. Now you'll see that I just snap every 1 inch. You could change it to every 1/4 inch. You know, whatever you want to do, I'll do 1/4 inch. Okay, but you can set that up. Notice you can also set up the grid if you want. Okay, I've got the grid that came up. You can set those settings if you want as well. But now and then you got the snap. You know, if you've got nice round numbers, I can go ahead and draw things. You can see, okay, I'm going to start there. And then I know I want to move 2.75 over, 1.5 up, and then, you know, whatever, like that. So you can play around with those snaps as needed. Okay. Again, I'm not a big fan. I'm going to turn them off because it makes it hard to select things sometimes. So I'm going to turn the snap off. Okay, but you can have it on there if you want. Okay. Now let's say you want to erase something. Okay. The easiest way is to just click on the line and then hit the delete key. Okay. You could also click on a line and hit the little erase button up here. Okay, so there's lots of different ways you can erase. Okay, one thing that you'll probably use an awful lot is the trim command. Okay, let me draw a line in here like this. Okay, and I just have some random line in there. Now, trim is when you just want to cut off a little piece of the line. Okay, and again, this isn't shown until chapter 2, but that is this little scissors here. So you can click on that, and what it'll do is just trim off the edge of a line if you want. Okay. Okay, or in the middle, just a section of the line. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Again, you can just click on it and then click on the section you want to erase. Now, 2 more things that I want to show you. Okay, the first is the circle. Okay, and there's lots of different circles. We're going to do center diameter, center radius today. The other one we'll talk about next time is tan radius. But let's say you have center diameter. Okay, so all you do is it says, okay, specify the center. Okay, so I'm going to put this at 2, 2. Okay, and then it says, hey, what diameter do you want? And let me put in, I don't know, 3 for the diameter. Okay, so it's 3 across. And there you have a circle that has a diameter of 3 and located at 3, 3. Okay, now, sometimes you see the snap that's going on here, right? What you can do sometimes is, okay, let's say I want a circle that is 2 inches over, 2 inches up from this line right here. Well, I can go over here and I can draw a construction line essentially. Okay, start at this point and say 2, 0, again using those relative coordinates, have that line there. Okay, and then I can come and I can draw. This time I'll do, let's do a radius this time. Then I can select the end line here like so, and let's say it's a 1/2 inch radius, something like that. I can draw that circle in there. Then I can go ahead and select this line and delete it. Okay, so a lot of times you can draw lines that you're ultimately going to be deleting later. Call those construction lines. Okay, it's just kind of a way to do things that'll make your life a little bit easier. Okay. Now again, you could trim these, and typically I draw a lot of circles, and if I want to trim them, I can do that. I can just select the trim, and I can just say get off, that little point there, or this little point there, and then essentially I have an arc like that. Now, there's another way you can do an arc that the book will walk you through. Okay, um, I think they do. We'll do center, start, and end. Okay. But again, you basically select the center of the circle of the arc that you're creating. Okay. I'll do it right here. And then you start here. And I wish you could, I'm not sure how to make it so it doesn't, it goes the other way. This is why I'm not a big fan of the arc. Okay. You can play around with it if you want. I think the easier way to do an arc, if you want, is to draw a circle. Okay, so say that's my arc, and then go ahead and do the trim. That's the way I usually do things, as you see me do it throughout the semester. Okay, but there's some of the features that'll help you get started, go through some of the ideas in on the assignments. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, that is it. All right, goodbye.